Okay, well, we'll get started. So, hi again, I'm Julie Otten with HealthLeaders Exchange, and I'm here today with Cathleen Wheatley, who is president of Wake Forest Baptist Health Center, and as well as senior vice president of clinical operations at Wake Forest Baptist. And we also have Eric Summers, I believe, on the call, who is a CMO. So, I don't know, Eric, if you want to appear to join in. Uh, this community call is just covering one of the current issues that is being discussed, and Kathleen agreed to lead this discussion because this is something that she has felt strongly about. And so, Kathleen, we're going to start with is about managing your reputational ranking. That in the past number of decades, hospitals and health systems have relied on some of these ranking groups, such as U.S. News, World Report, Leapfrog, Magnet, to be able to rank them in terms of their quality and really the value that they have. And so a lot of patients pay attention to this and selecting who their healthcare provider is going to be. You are looking at the landscape today and just saying about the shift um, in what's happened over not just in the past few years since the pandemic, but really over the course of time. But especially now, this is a new landscape. And so you're starting to question about totally relying on these rankings, because it could be that hospitals are not going to be able to fit the criteria that they're being evaluated on. So can you talk about that, of what's changed and why is this a concern?
Yes, I can. Thank you for asking me to join today. Welcome, everyone. As we know, rankings matter because we have data and evidence that shows that patients and consumers really look to that when they determine their choices about their healthcare. So they're out there and they matter and they're highly publicized. I think some of the challenges today are that these original metrics from many of these Leapfrog, Magnet has metrics, U.S. News and World Report, etc., a mix of process and outcome measures, but they're not new. They're older ones that have not necessarily aged into, well, some of the challenges that we're facing in the workforce today. As we all know, COVID changed all of our lives in healthcare, not just from a health perspective ourselves, but how the challenges that we're facing in terms of additional compression on revenue from increasing labor expense. The traveler workforce has drastically changed our labor expense for sure at Wake Forest. And also the fact that, how you incorporate your best practices into your nursing care, in this example, when you have so many people coming through that are somewhat renters and not owners. It makes that more challenging to be able to achieve some of the outcomes that you may have well-trained your staff to achieve over time. Pressure also would be, an excellent example of that. In addition, I think this continued compression around a length of stay, and also patients are coming to us and they're sicker. So, one of my concerns as a leader is we know that these matter to consumers, but there hasn't been a shift in any of the metrics to accommodate some of the changes that we're facing in terms of the workforce. If we look at U.S. News and World Report has staffing ratio indicators, and so does Magnet, et cetera. But it's become more difficult to have our frontline nurses, in Magnet's case, to be involved with some of the committee work and driving results, because we just can't pull them away from the bedside. So, I don't want to be disillusioned by the fact that, at the inception of many of these reporting programs, the reputational programs back in the early 2000s, it was really the advent of quality reporting and external reporting of quality outcomes, HCAHPS, and all of that. But it hasn't, and it did help. I believe it drove healthcare at that time to be more mindful, to focus on the things that at that time mattered and continue to matter, but in a different way. So it did push the industry. It pushed us to be more driven and more intentional in achieving outcomes and building processes. But at this point in time, they have not evolved. I don't think the metrics have evolved to allow us to not teach to the test. right? I mean, we all want to make sure that we achieve the rankings, but to a certain extent, is it really as valuable as it used to be? And do the metrics at times disadvantage those hospitals and health systems that may not have as high of a margin as some others? So does it reward those health systems that have a broad consumer base and a great payer mix and in a growing market? It's easier to then make your margin and be able to reinvest in your programs and reinvest in meeting some of the metrics. And then, one of my least favorite is, because I don't think that it's really locked in reality, is leapfrog. Is leapfrog hand hygiene. We're all measuring hand hygiene. We've always measured hand hygiene. Nobody has a perfect way to measure hand hygiene. So, yeah, you get my point. So it just creates, I think, a lot of effort on all of us as leaders. And in some ways, are we being held hostage to these reporting agencies that rank our reputation, but not necessarily in a value add way? And in the context of, they don't educate the consumer to understand what these scores break down to. And of course, many of the data are old, right? You can be 2 years late in some of these. So even if you've improved drastically anything in the last year, it's going to take you another year to catch up on it. So, so there's some, I think, frustration. I don't think we're unique. I mean, Julie, when we spoke recently, you mentioned that some of these same concerns have been expressed by academic institutions based on their U.S. News and World Report ratings, and the concern that maybe those metrics are not truly indicative of the educational experience that they provide. So, so anyway, just wanted to sort of bring it up and open to those of you on the call. Are you feeling the same way? And do you have specific strategies that you've put in place to enable you to meet some of those that are more difficult to demonstrate an achievement on? Just where is everybody on this, and what are you all thinking about this? Do you feel the same, that it's a lot of pressure and not necessarily as valid a measure as they claim to be? So we have one. Yeah, please go.
So Lou Brusco from Hackensack Meridian in New Jersey. It's funny that we were having this discussion, because I'm in the process on my other screen of typing up goals for our quality goals for 2023, and they are pure 100% based on the CMS star ratings. And so all of the goals that we choose have to be chosen from things that will have the maximum impact on our star ratings, because that's been determined by the network as our biggest whole. And the frustrating part about that is that, star ratings to a large extent are a subset of patients. It's the Medicare only patient population for many of the metrics. And I have very few straight Medicare at one of my hospitals, or even Medicare at all. Mm-hmm. Most of them are either self-pay or Medicaid. And so, when I'm trying to look at this and I say, they want me to reduce, mortality in myocardial infarction patients, or CHF patients, I said, okay, I had 3 last year. In the entire year, 1 died. So, right. I mean, it's just you mentioned U.S. News. I mean, the biggest problem is that the academic institutions have complained so much, that they have the fudge factor for the academics, that reputation scale. And so, the reputation score is purely to improve the scores of those academic institutions so they come up on top. So, I mean, it is what it is. We have to deal with it. But yes, it's a big part of it.
It's a big challenge for all of us. Thoughts from others?
I'm Tamara Parrish at Hancock Regional Hospital, and the CMS stuff is very difficult, because anything you do now, you're not going to see the effects of for 2 years. So, and then if you have one bad year, or we're a much smaller hospital where one readmission can change your entire HRRP penalty. So it's been very difficult to try to hone in when the denominator is so tiny.
That's an excellent point. Again, to my earlier statement, is that it disadvantages hospitals that are may have a lower margin, or in your case, smaller hospitals, but providing very critical care. I can't actually tell who the hands are. Maybe you can tell, Julie, but you're muted. But I think I see Cynthia. You're muted, Julie.
Hi, can you hear me?
We have Jennifer
Yes.
Gentry and Cynthia Latney both. So Jennifer, why don't we start with you with Portland, Providence, Portland?
Yeah, great. Sorry, I'm not on camera today. Got too many things going on around me. But Kathleen, I think you did a great description, and then even listening to the last comments, we're finding we've made some decisions recently not to participate in like Leapfrog and some of the others, but then the challenge becomes now you're at risk of getting a worse score because you're not feeding all of the information that they can get. And I just want to add that, for some of these things, there's pretty significant cost associated with participating. And during times, like we're all facing right now, it's really hard to justify that additional expense. Like everyone else has said, we have ongoing strategies in most of the areas that are covered by the different ratings. And so we don't do a lot of really purposeful planning in order to just impact those scores. Just because what everyone else has said, these are often long-term projects. What you have achieved are not going to show up for an extended period of time. By the time it's showing up, you're already moved on and working on something different. So it's really hard to make the connection between, the operations and the real-time strategies and goals with the rating. So I appreciate this conversation today. I'm hoping to learn more from others on maybe some strategies and how to navigate in that space.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. And what about you, Cynthia Latney with Ohio Health?
I really do appreciate the conversation here at Ohio
Cynthia,
Health.
you're a little hard to hear. Lean in.
Lean in. Let me see.
Yeah. That's better.
Is that better? Perfect.
Yes.
Here at Ohio Health, we really have been intentional of not really chasing the rankings and using the dollars to do that. We've been focusing more so on the consumer experience and working on access and doing mortality, because we know we have an opportunity in that, and that's really important to quality in the CMS stars. And we know that some of that work is lagging. And so we really do some focus work on using leading indicators. So we are understanding how we're going to be impacting those future metrics as they come out in those lagging numbers. We feel like that's probably a better choice as where we're spending our dollars instead of putting those dollars in programs like the Leapfrog and kind of tracing hand hygiene, right? We understand what is needed to keep our patients safe in that infection prevention, but spending those dollars to get those rankings is not really where our attention is today.
Thank you, Cynthia. And Eric, let's hear from a CMO with Wake Forest.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Good to see you again. I sorry my camera's not working, but yeah, I echo Cynthia's thought. I mean, it's a dichotomy, and I'm sure y'all are all like we are here at Wake Forest. We want to do the best we can for our patients, and patient care is number one. But I also can't deny that, when we weren't focused on Leapfrog, people would catch me on the sidewalk or at the store and say, "Hey, why is Wake Forest a C?" Your neighbors who put up billboards, the neighborhood hospital says they're an A and you're a C. And people, to Kathleen's point,
We're not a C anymore, Eric.
Yeah, we're not a C anymore. Yes, I was going to end with that, but yes, but yeah, the people in the community, that's all they see, A or C, or they don't know all the stuff that we know. So we did make an effort about a year and a half, 2 years ago to say, okay, we're going to put resources into these reputational rankings. And it's tough because, yes, when you go down and you look at line by line what you need to do, you can have a team and you can implement and you can change. I mean, we're a C. We're probably going to be an A at the next level, the next Leapfrog grade results. But that costs money. That's time. That's taken away from other things. And last point I'll make that wasn't mentioned was mortality, for instance. you know, we're a tertiary care hospital. We want to help people. We get a lot of people that have elderly people or others that have brain bleeds, and they come to us for drainage and as a last ditch hope for life. We get penalized for that by Leapfrog, by CMS, by US News and World Report, because some of those patients don't live, but if we don't try, they're not going to live, period. But because of the fact that we transferred them, because of the fact they came to us and we did a procedure and they passed away, we get dinged for that. So it's a struggle of, you know, to Kathleen's point, these rankings do not totally tell one what a hospital is about and what they're doing. But at the end of the day, we have to do the right thing. And so we try to balance the reputation and doing what's right.
Thank you, Eric. It also just extremely visible is just the whole magnet, Kathleen. I mean, we won't go into the whole thing, but just the RN ratios and how people are redesigning their models of care. And it's like, is this realistic that you're going to have to meet these requirements of the number of RNs today? And what
So
do you do
before
with
I
that
go
with the
there,
magnet, not getting that magnet certification?
I think there's another hand up. Is that accurate before I answer your question? Or is that Eric who didn't put his hand down?
I think Jennifer's hand's still up. Jennifer, do you have another comment or?
No, I'm stretching, that's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, Magnet doesn't prescribe your ratios, but a component of other reporting agencies do measure that. The challenge that I feel with Magnet, one of the pressures is around your percentage of your staff that are BSN prepared. Yes, we know that we have data, we have evidence, we have all of Linda Aiken's work over many, many, many decades actually, to show that their outcomes are better with BSNs than with ADRNs. However, the challenge now to get nurses at the bedside is much worse than it used to be. And so if you want to be able to staff your hospital to the levels that we all want to be able to do, that are not just safe, but are also nurse friendly. By that, I mean, create an environment where nurses don't feel overwhelmed, because overwhelmed nurses doesn't translate into good stuff, right? So, you know, I just think that, and I'll give you an example. In North Carolina, I have twice as many AD programs as BSN programs. So if I say I'm only going to hire, you know, 30% of my workforce is going to be associate degree, I mean, it's going to be bachelor's, associate degree nurses, I am leaving a supply of nurses on the table that I'm not choosing to hire. And we certainly cannot afford to do that, because it's just too hard to recruit and it's hard to retain. And many of our staff went and traveled. They're slowly coming back. But I think, you know, if we read the literature on nurse staffing over time, the traveler phenomenon is not anticipated to resolve itself and go away. It's very much been gig economy generations, and I'm not dissing any generation, but it is becoming the preferred employment option for about 30% of nurses out there. So, you know, when you start putting all of that together, if you have tremendous pressure like we all do to control labor expense, then using travelers to make sure that you can continue to staff your hospital to the levels you want is not an ideal, efficient model. So, I mean, I cannot turn associate degree nurses away. And I would also say that many of them are excellent nurses. So I think that that would be an example of some of the challenges that we face. You know, I think Magnet has had value over time, but I'm not sure that it has the same value that it had over time. And again, I get back to, I do feel at times that it disadvantages those hospitals that are providing care in marginalized environments and who are not operating with the same kind of margin, because it is an expensive program to run, not just from the direct expenses associated with it, but as I mentioned, you have to have enough nurses that you can actually be pulling your nurses away from bedside care to meet some of the other requirements that are part of the program. And also there's a whole lot of data collection that's involved, and you have to have people doing that as well. So all those investments have to be made. So, you know, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that when they all started, I think they really did help us. And there are elements of it that definitely remain important. I guess if I had to do my Santa Claus wish, it would be, how do we as healthcare organizations make some impression on these agencies to let them know that if their intention is to help us demonstrate the quality of care that we're providing, that there needs to be an evolution of some of the metrics. And I don't know if that is actually happening. I would like to think that it is, and that AHA is able to play a role in that, but I'm not convinced that they are. So if I can be educated by anyone else who knows more about that, that would be helpful. But we're just putting it out there. Now, we can't ignore it, and we don't ignore it. And CMS star ratings is another one. But they're not all living in a context that enables us to translate into achieving these. And as Eric mentioned, in our market, we have our competitors got their billboards, but they're not providing tertiary and quaternary care. And so that disadvantages us in terms of the optics on that, right? So so that's where I sit on this. Sheila, may I ask you, what are you seeing in your environment? And what is
Sure,
your
can you hear
position
me?
on this? Yes.
So just reading Dr. Brusco's question in alignment with yours in terms of magnet, coming from a non-magnet facility to a magnet system, I definitely see the value that it brings. It elevates the profession of nursing. And it's not just for nursing, it's the whole care team. It's shown in our quality outcomes as it relates to nursing excellence. And it just drives the performance of the entire organization. But having said that, it is expensive. I think it gives some organizations a misperception that they can't expand their care delivery model with LVNs. And you're right, Kathleen, we cannot sustain having all BSNs at this point. When you have excellent ADN nurses, LVNs can support and extend your care team. So those are the things that we need to take a look at. But in terms of the value of magnet with shared governance and making sure that we have joy in the workplace for our nurses, it plays a big role. I would have to say that. So it does provide value. But I have other colleagues who are thinking about demagnetizing. It's sort of a strange term, just because of the operational costs, because having those shared governance councils, nursing activities, sending nurses to conferences, it's something that our CFOs take, they get together with our nursing operational leaders and ask, do you really need that? To some degree you do, to maintain your magnet status and your magnet experience. So you really have to evaluate the value that it brings. But generally, I would definitely say it does bring value.
I don't want to say that I disagree with that. My point is really more about, are all of the metrics in the context of the current challenges or the way that the workforce has changed? It's just a conversation that I'm not sure is happening at the levels that it might need to happen. And how do we influence that?
If I can just add, Kathleen, I think Magnet, in terms of the commissioners and Magnet itself, ANCC, just like the other agencies that have ratings, they need to assess the current and the relevancy of their measures. And does it fit the current landscape of the patient acuity and complexity that's going on right now?
And the workforce, the migration of our workforce. And maybe this won't last. Maybe 3 years from now, we'll have a different assessment about what the implications on the workforce that are the sequela of the COVID pandemic. And not to mention all the burnout issues that go with that. And burnout's another factor in people's willingness to give discretionary effort to some of these initiatives that we're talking about. And there's another hand up.
I think we have Eric. Did you want to add to this?
Yeah, I'll let Jennifer go first, and I'll add after.
Jennifer Gentry?
Yeah, Kathleen, I can see both sides of this. We have a good number of magnet organizations in Providence, and having been in one before, not been in one, I definitely see the value in the structure and that culturation of shared decision making that Magnet brings, and especially in the engagement of our nurses. And, you know, we're doing some work. To your point, I don't think that everything, all of the requirements and all of the elements that are defined in Magnet are relevant to what we're doing today. You know, it's kind of, I see them as a potential distraction from the real work at hand, which really is about how do we make healthcare sustainable again, and how do we proceed with our current workforce challenges, et cetera. And so, you know, while I think that the value is there, and I understand the expense, but what I have found is in that expense, because there's been an investment, there's more willingness to sustain the support of the structure needed to maintain it. You know, there's not a desire to have paid for all of this and then just kind of drop it. So I found that to be beneficial for me and my organizations. But we're going through a process right now to reevaluate how we do shared governance in my division, which crosses 5 states and Providence, to really think about, you know, participation, what are the right things to focus on, how do we come together, virtual, in person, you know, all of those things to slim it down, but in a way that still brings value and still helps with that engagement. And I think this is a space that, you know, ANCC should be evaluating and saying, what do we need to be focused on today, and get rid of the noise that is not going to bring value to the current state. Because we're going to struggle in almost all of our hospitals with some of the elements, simply because there's just no bandwidth to get to all of them.
We don't want to just pick on one. I think the statements that are being made are true of all of the different rankings, right? There are components of it that have not evolved and don't actually provide the value that is needed to help consumers know where they should go for their care. So Eric, do you have your hand up still? Yeah?
Yes, I do. I was going to make one point, you know, as we talked earlier, we've gone down the reputational ranking pathway. We're navigating Leapfrog, CMS, US News Report. I want to give one thing that I learned and would highly recommend for our organizations if you're not doing this. We created a multidisciplinary team that looks daily at our PSIs, our HACs, our HAIs, hospital-acquired infections, and it opened up a whole world. Billers and coders are great at what they do in the book learning, but you need a clinical perspective. I can tell you that one of our hospitals with falls and trauma, our coders that were submitting CPR or broken ribs as falls and trauma, and AHRQ, CMS, they accepted that. They don't tell you, oh, it doesn't meet criteria. They just accept it. If you drill into that data, you will find some opportunities. And granted, that takes time, but it all feeds into this grade, to the star rating. It's all part of your reputation. And you don't want to submit things that you didn't actually do. And so we've learned a ton from that. I can't recommend doing that enough if you're not doing it already.
Any other?
Thank you, Eric.
Go ahead, Julie.
No, I was going to say thank you, Eric, and we've just got a couple more minutes. So any other thoughts or comments about what people are focusing on?
So this is really fascinating. This is Praveen Chopra from Gunderson and Bellin Health. Really fascinating discussion. One of the things that we are trying to look at is maybe a little bit differently is we're looking at 4 personas. First of all, we are thinking about using reputation as a comparative advantage. I think we have so many things going on within our space, from Leapfrog to CMS Star to Magnet to Davis Award. The question is, if we want to use that as a comparative advantage, then the question we are saying is, who is our audience? And we have talked about 4 different personas. We're talking about patients, 2 is staff, number 3 is our community, and 4th is our, we call it clinicians. So if you look at those 4 personas, what is really important for them? I'll give you one example. What we actually are doing a little bit differently is about, we know that our experience is important for our patients. So we were using the health grades, and it's like all of us know about likelihood to recommend. And in the middle of that thing, we actually have a DEI initiative, and we have pivoted. We have pivoted that from, it's more than likelihood to recommend, is I think we're focusing on is, how uniquely are we treating individuals or patients? So it's all about unique, and we learn more because there's more literature. It's not about people who want to be classified as a race or a gender or education. They want to be treated uniquely because every single person has a unique need. So we've pivoted that, and I think we are beginning to see, and it is changing the approach we're following. So we actually changed our questionnaire. And one of the things is about, okay, how did you feel about being treated uniquely by our staff? So that's, I think, one thing we're trying to do it from the clinical perspective. And then from, again, we're trying to now use 3 different lenses for these persona. Is about, we call it enhanced triple aim. Okay, how do we actually demonstrate that our experience and quality both are unique? So that's where we start looking at the CMS star is there. How do we do that? We also have a payer plan, which is again a CMS highest star 5 rated thing. So we're focusing on that because that is cost of doing business. So believe that doing the CMS star is a cost of doing business. When we look at the staff, we are trying to think about what is our philosophy about the future of workplace and how people are. And the measure that we're using is about is motivational quotient, and it is a composite measure of multiple things about mastery, autonomy, fulfillment, and it boils around to a 5-point scale of motivational quotient. So we're looking at that. So the higher the motivational quotient, we're making it a best place to attract the talent, especially given the future of where the workforce is going. So that's kind of approaches we're doing it. We're experimenting a lot. We don't know whether it is right or wrong. However, we are seeing some good response from the users we're trying to target.
Great. Praveen, thank you. Good to see you too. We're out of time. This has been a great discussion, and I'm sure there's a lot more to be said. So Kathleen, thank you so much for leading this this discussion. And like I said, there's many more times for us to talk during our exchanges, as well as we will be having monthly community calls coming up. So just be on the lookout, and we'll be in touch. So thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Julie, for doing these. These are great.
Oh, great. Good to see you, Dr. Brusco.
Bye-bye.
Bye.